We have some pretty crazy news today. We're going to go ahead and go over the OpenAI and AMD massive partnership where OpenAI is acquiring nearly 10% of AMD and they're deploying 6 gigawatts of energy. We're going to go ahead and break down this deal. But first off, let's go ahead and listen to this clip from CNBC and then I'll give you my thoughts as well as some details around the deal. Well, at least the details that we have so far. So let me go ahead and roll the clip and we'll go ahead and chat about it after.
We do have some breaking news right now. I want to get straight to it. It's a new AI partnership, and it is fascinating. AMD's stock is surging. OpenAI and AMD getting together this after OpenAI, of course, doing a deal just a week and a half ago now with NVIDIA. Kenzie Sagalas has the details on all of it. What's happening here?
So, Andrew, OpenAI is teaming up with AMD in a partnership that could give Sam Altman's startup a 10% stake in the chip maker virtually for free. Now, the rollout starts with 1 gigawatt of AMD's Instinct GPUs in 2026 and expands to 6 gigawatts across multiple hardware generations. Now, as part of this arrangement, OpenAI receives up to 160 million shares of AMD stock through performance-based warrants priced at just 1 cent each, compared to AMD's current trading price of around $165. Now, those shares vest as deployments grow, but both companies are also billing it as a massive win for AMD, which has trailed NVIDIA for years. It's also a clear sign that OpenAI doesn't want to be dependent on just one supplier. This is all about OpenAI locking in the supply chain that it needs to scale, and it comes within weeks of cutting a $100 billion deal with NVIDIA. It's also in talks to build custom chips with Broadcom, and comes as OpenAI plans a $1 trillion plus infrastructure build out across chips, data centers, and custom silicone. It is a tightly wound circular economy and one that analysts fear could face real strain if any link in the chain starts to weaken. Guys?
So can we just discuss, this is in many ways the opposite of NVIDIA, when NVIDIA invested effectively in OpenAI. In this instance, OpenAI is getting shares in AMD, but I also imagine OpenAI is going to have to pay for the access to these chips and these data centers that are going to have these chips.
OpenAI using NVIDIA's funds to turn around and fund their competitor?
Well, so that's an interesting element to it too. But the question is sort of ultimately, where is all the money going to come from? Because even with the money that it's getting from NVIDIA, for example, by my math, it still doesn't have all of this money.
Yeah, great question. So let's start with how it's going to pay for it. The $100 billion worth of equity that NVIDIA is putting into OpenAI is also pegged to certain build-out milestones being met. It's rolling out in $10 billion increments per gigawatt. Now, that goes into a pool of cash that OpenAI can spend on anything that it wants to. It is not contractually obligated to give it all back to NVIDIA. So, yes, ostensibly, that could also go to AMD to buy their chips. And, yes, they're buying the chips from AMD directly, which is separate to this equity arrangement. Now, in terms of how they're going to pay for it, yes, there is a huge shortfall.
Well, they can buy their chips directly from AMD, or they can go through their cloud partners, think like CoreWeave, Oracle, Microsoft, stuff like that.
Each gigawatt is roughly $50 billion. So $35 billion typically goes to the chip maker. The other $15 billion is roughly what the data center build out requires. Now, to pay for that, I was talking to Sarah Friar 2 weeks ago, and she says that equity is too expensive to hand out. So it's all about debt. And so that $100 billion investment from NVIDIA gives them leverage at the bank because they're not cash flow positive. And Andrew, well, I mean, your entire team has talked to Sam Altman about the fact that he has no intention of becoming profitable anytime soon because his goals are so ambitious and that requires additional compute build out.
And so where ultimately do you see the money coming from? I mean, I hear you saying it's going to come in the form of debt. We obviously saw, a company like Oracle take on, I think, $17 billion in new debt. We haven't seen classic debt being taken on, right, by like OpenAI, for example.
They're literally speechless. This is hilarious.
Not yet. But the other piece of this, I'm going to head pretty soon to Dev Day, which is OpenAI's big event. They're bringing in 1,500 plus developers. And that's another play here for them. Sam Altman is looking to monetize the tech that they have. So last week, they had this e-commerce strategy announced where they're basically cutting deals with merchants to get a portion of transaction revenue. It's starting with Etsy. It's growing to Shopify. But this is an ambition that Sam Altman has talked about for a very long time. He brought Fiji Simo in-house, and she is someone who is just known during her Meta days of being able to turn product into revenue engines. Now, it's not going to look the same as what she did at the social media giant, but she is trying to invent new ways to make money. You saw the Sora app. It's now #1 in the Apple App Store. This is the video generation software tool, and it's still highly gated, but there's a lot of interest there. Altman specifically said this could also be a good monetization engine. But I brought up Dev Day because ultimately they want more killer apps built on top of OpenAI's bones. Because to your point, Andrew, they don't have enough cash. Debt, I mean, they haven't taken on debt yet. And even if they do, that's not going to be enough. But the company is projecting for $120 billion in revenue by 2030. And this is a big part of that strategy.
I mean, that is a staggering amount of market cap gain in AMD. That's over $60 billion. So much for Intel catching up. It was coming back a little bit. It was 160 back to 170 billion. This takes AMD from 270 or so billion well up into the 300 billion plus range. That is an amazing move in one day. I mean, shareholders must be. AMD shareholders are like glad they don't have the Mondays, Mackenzie. They don't have the.
They don't. And they've got the Fridays. But this is a huge endorsement of their entire Instinct GPU line because this is not a one-off deal. This is OpenAI committing to buying several generations of this tech, and it is a leg up that AMD needed.
330 billion. Yeah.
Is this? I mean, you mentioned that this is them trying to diversify the supply chain. I guess they've been doing that on every level, trying to make sure that it's not just Microsoft they're reliant on. This has been their new strategy for a while.
Yeah, I mean, that Microsoft relationship is a big part of how they unlock the $40 billion tranche of cash in that SoftBank-led round. Now they've got a term sheet. We don't know what that looks like because the Microsoft relationship, one part of it is commercial. And so we know that they would like to revise down that 20% revenue share that they're currently giving to Microsoft when they make enterprise sales. I've talked to Brad Lightcap, their COO, who's been leading their go-to-market team, and that's scaled from up to 700 people in the last 18 months from a couple dozen. It's been pretty tremendous, the effort that they've made on that front. But separately to that, Microsoft, I mean, once their biggest investor, their biggest partner, listed them with the SEC as a key AI rival. So we've seen this relationship evolve in the last year.
Mackenzie, one of the things I'm trying to understand here is whether you believe, and maybe you know or don't know, I don't know the answer to this, whether NVIDIA knew when it made this deal a week and a half ago now that, or maybe 2 weeks ago, that this was possible.
OpenAI has made no secret of the fact. Sarah Friar openly talking about the fact that they plan to diversify their chip strategy. I asked her in Abilene, Texas, whether or not that preferred provider language that they used with NVIDIA meant that they were exclusive. And she said, no, we plan to use AMD chips. I mean, for weeks now, they've been talking to Broadcom about building a custom chip that might lead to even more effective compute if it's designed with a proprietary model in mind that would fit with OpenAI's LLM specifically. So I don't think that there's any secret that they were going to diversify. Now, I mean, someone who might have been more surprised was Microsoft when they heard about some of these compute build-outs, because historically OpenAI was getting all of its compute power from Azure, and then they announced this $300 billion deal with Oracle, and that was the week that we saw the term sheet come from Microsoft and OpenAI, which is the thing that we were waiting for in terms of negotiating the relationship between those two partners. So that would be interesting to me. And I don't have the answer to that, but it's a question that I'm asking.
Great. So really crazy. And they put some good light on the fact that this isn't
the other big story of the
they
morning.
they put some light on the fact that, yeah, like they may be using some of that NVIDIA money that had signed a deal for 2 weeks ago to buy these AMD chips. So NVIDIA is funding OpenAI, and OpenAI is using potentially some of that money to go buy the 6 gigawatts of chips and up to 10% of AMD. So they didn't go into too many details of the deal. So let's go ahead and cover those details right now, as well as my thoughts and in some other perspective that may be interesting. Okay, so they're going to collaborate on AI data centers and run AMD processors. This isn't. I thought this was directly competing with NVIDIA, and while it is competing to some terms, it's not like any deals are being lost with NVIDIA or anything like that. This is from OpenAI's perspective, more of a diversification of supply chain, of power, of compute. So it's more of a diversification. can't say that word this morning. 6 gigawatts is nearly 6 million homes. That's roughly the size of the Houston metro area. So an insane amount of compute, but that's over time, right? So they are, and that power could be used something for, whether that's generating Sora models, whether that's training a GPT-7, just some ideas that I had regarding why they may need that much right now. So again, they'll be purchasing 6 gigawatts of the AMD MI450 chip, which could be the 450 chip, which could be, it's not just that one, it could be the later generations as well. This goes toe to toe with the Blackwell or the future Rubin architectures. At the time of this recording, AMD is up, let me see, AMD is up 37%, and you have NVIDIA was down just 1% or so, again, because this 1%. So again, this isn't directly competing with NVIDIA. It's just more of kind of like, well, like, why are you hanging out with them kind of deal. So you have OpenAI said that the chips, they can buy chips directly from NVIDIA or through the cloud partners. So I think like CoreWeave, which is up nominally this morning, pre-market. You have CoreWeave. You also have Azure. You also have Oracle cloud partners, right? OpenAI will receive warrants for up to 160 million AMD shares, roughly 10% of the chip company, if all 6 tranches are exercised. The 6 tranches are awarded in phases, similar to the NVIDIA deal that we saw. The AMD stock price also has to increase for the warrants to be exercised. AMD at the time was up 35%. I think, sorry, I just looked, but I just already forgot, is up 37% now. It is currently on track for the largest market cap move in history, which we're going to keep on absolutely crazy. And they're going to deploy 1 gigawatt. So roughly a 16, 18% of their total deal starting late 2026. So next year. What this screams to me is that the party's still going to keep going. These longer term deals, it could prop up the market until then. So it's going to be really interesting to see where things lie, because even if jobs are coming in poor or the economy may be suffering a little bit, you're going to have these large tech companies continue to make these longer term deals, because what Sam Altman is doing, as you heard CNBC talk about, is they're effectively locking in their supply chain for the next few years, right? They don't want to get into 2027 and be having to scramble because NVIDIA can't provide as much compute because xAI is competing with it. And you're going to start to see more of these competitors, like, is xAI going to start making more of these deals? And is that going to keep the party going? The party going meaning these really elevated share prices. Is that going to keep the party going for even longer? So just to kind of summarize what OpenAI has done now, I got this from the Kobisi letter, which is, they do a great job. OpenAI now has a $100 billion investment from NVIDIA, up to 10% ownership in AMD, a $500 billion Stargate investment, a $500 billion valuation, and OpenAI is still owned by a nonprofit parent company. I have no idea when or how that restructuring will take place, but that sounds like a headache and an expensive one at that. So I do want to share one thing that I thought was interesting here, and then let me go ahead and pop this up. Okay, so on October 2nd, users on X began noting unusual options activity on AMD. Over $6 million worth of long-dated calls were purchased, and flows into AMD were strong. October 2nd, I believe that was Friday. That was Thursday or Friday. One user explicitly said that they bet AMD just signed a multi-billion-dollar deal to support GPUs to OpenAI. 4 days later, AMD announced a deal with OpenAI that will generate tens of billions of dollars in revenue. And it's just saying Beyond X is an alpha. But it's just so crazy that you can track some of these the option flow with these contracts. It's pretty crazy. So that might be something that I will be paying attention to in the future, just to keep an eye on. So that's what happened with OpenAI and AMD this morning. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Is this something that's going to keep the party going for longer, or do you think that that just means the bubble is going to pop even sooner? So let me know what you think down in the comments.